Hello there, Steve here in Sydney of the late Gnosis website truebluehealer.com, where in just 20 minutes you can get immediate physical evidence that something's changed in you as your divine spark is activated. Within a week you'll get some vivid messaging dreams, and ultimately you'll have an internal mentoring voice which will assist you in navigating your way through the blizzard of mis and disinformation that you in particular find coming off the internet. Okay. First item I'd like to talk about is a bit more on Jordan Peterson, who's becoming a household name even in Australia. He's in the newspapers, front pages, that sort of thing. He's on the television, he's on mainstream media talk shows, that sort of thing. And I've only ever thought that he was simply a surrogate father figure for so many lost, wandering young people, in particular men. So I've always supported and admired his drill sergeant attitude of stand up and be a man, stick your chest out and do what you're supposed to do, right? Establish your boundaries and what you'll stand for and what you won't stand for, and speak truth to power, you see. All of that sounds wonderful, and I think a lot of young men need that pep talk. And it's basically for free, and it's working, it's very helpful to a whole lot of lost, wandering people. Another subject that he talks about is IQ and how it can be a vicious predictor of your future productivity and future prospects in your society. And he talks with great emotion, almost crying, about low IQ people, how difficult it is for them to learn stuff which average people can do in 5 minutes. He talks about the difficulties and the travails of people with an IQ of 83. He gives that as an example, as sort of like a watershed IQ number. And he said they have almost insurmountably difficult life because of it, and he greatly empathises with them, which is all very praiseworthy. But I like to point out that that's the average IQ of Saudi Arabia. 83 is the average IQ of Saudi Arabia. They sit on the world's biggest oil deposits and do all the world's terrorism, basically, as much as they can, laundering their money through other states, etc., including Hillary Clinton. So there's a lot of stuff you can get out of Jordan Peterson's common sense messages. I know because for time limitations, Jordan Peterson has got to fit whatever he says into a time slot. And for that reason, he's got to discard some of the main body of lectures, which is actually doing what seems to be a university course broken up into 10,000 little episodes on YouTube, which is very useful to millions of people. So one thing he hasn't talked yet about IQ is, I haven't found it yet, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think he's found out yet or talked anything about the correlation between IQ and lying. One of the things that distinguishes us from animals is that because we can speak, we can lie to each other. And you might argue that in our modern day society, mendacity is king. It makes far more money than truth-telling. My experience with people lying has been that low IQ people make very bad liars and soon get caught out, especially by the people who know them and can even see the lies coming. That's people with higher IQs listening to them, you see. Now, while it's good to grieve for the people who aren't very bright and struggle to live a daily life and everything's complex for them, the other end of the spectrum I don't think he covers, and that is the people who claim the world's highest verbal IQ. I've always quarrelled with that, because I think it probably makes them the most competent fluid liars on the planet. And there's a danger to that, because he's always talking about bell curves, and once you fall off the bell curve, you've had it, right? Your history. Well, it's possible to be such a habitual and fluid liar that you begin to believe your own propaganda. And a stunning example of this would be the entirely one ethnic group station called CNN in America, where they were physically sick practically in their waste paper baskets when Donald Trump won the election. And I think it's more than a year later and they still haven't recovered from the shock of all their lives and all their emotional investment of years in the making was flushed down the toilet. So they were very cruelly and harshly brought back to reality, but continue the same behaviour that put them in that terribly bad position of endless lying, endless mendacity at every utterance. And still they're smarting very much today and desperately trying to turn the clock back to yesteryear when they had full control of the government, basically. This one ethnic group that happens to staff the entire CNN from CEO down to the front newsreader. That's been verified by people looking it all up, you see. Now, just building on that knowledge we all have, it could be said that their continued behaviour over many centuries, and that's clearly one of them, habitual lying and deception, forever trying to mislead people about basically everything political, has probably backfired on them over the centuries numerous times. The latest count I've seen claimed to be the most accurate count is they've been thrown out of 87 countries some 300 times. Now, I'd like to point out that that's a glowing endorsement of humanity's handling of them, because they weren't killed and they weren't imprisoned. They were simply asked to leave and go somewhere else. And the problem perpetuated because with no communications, they could easily infiltrate the new host country and start the whole process again. So that's repeated many dozens of times over the centuries. And I'm quite certain habitual lying and fraud, never telling the truth to the common people of the host nation, has played a major role in their being ejected so many times from human civilisations. Now, because it's been such an established tradition, these throwouts, everywhere they go, that's been happening, that I don't think we should flaunt tradition. It's still happening recently in Guatemala, I believe, and they're still smarting about that. And I think ultimately it might be the best solution for the Western world to recover from the great insult, the great assault done to it by these people who infest the halls of power all too frequently in a kind of background string-pulling mode. And the wonderful thing today is now they've got their own home sweet home country to go to that they've always yearned for. And so I think they could go and practice their mendacity on their own people to their endless delight, which they must surely find in their daily lying exercises. They can do it in their own home country and enjoy life with all these people who like listening to lies and want to be told lies and practice telling lies themselves as a way of life. And I'll just add here, most of our behaviour is genetic. And I would say it's a genetic tendency that's got them thrown out of so many countries that they continue this behaviour. And a vital cog in that behaviour is probably being extremely good at lying. But the problem with lying is ultimately you get found out because people are observant. They remember what you said last week, last year, that sort of thing. So, and with their own hidden set of rules that agreements don't have to be kept with those other people in the host nation, running their own inverted sense of ethics, you can see why people get thrown out of countries time and time again. But I do suggest carrying on the noble tradition is a solution to the Western world's problem. And a way to encourage that would be what happened in the 1930s, where people were encouraged to go to the home country because it was so wonderful. This desert kingdom waiting for them. And, well, there was agreements with great dictators and coins were struck. We all know about this. and they had to be chased back because most of them didn't want to leave comfortable Europe and go and live in this warm desert kingdom, you see. So, but the Havara Agreement is there for all to view below this video. I'll put a link there for you so that you know about it. And there's no reason why we couldn't do a more modern and kinder version of that to everyone's benefit, don't you think? It's certainly something we could consider, couldn't we? Why not? We're looking at 1 billion people being genocided, and taking some kind, firm action to stop 1 billion people being genocided in Europe, I think, is worthy of our attention. Just back to Jordan Peterson for a minute and his disastrous appearance at some town hall place in Canada, where he was hit with a double-barreled gotcha question which forced him to walk off stage and refuse to answer when he was, basically the question was put to him. I'll put the video below here, so if you haven't seen it, you'll know it. It was taken immediately off YouTube. It's actually on BitChute. And the question put to him is a real double-barreled, hard-hitting question. Basically, in light of the fact that you think all things Russian are fantastic and you're a great fan of Russian literature, why haven't you read Solzhenitsyn's other book? And it's called 200 Years Together, you see. And of course he can't answer it because the book covers something terrible in history that a certain ethnic group wants to keep completely under the carpet and be able to repeat it in Europe. The object is to produce 1917 all over again in 2017 or 2018 in Europe. And the program is well underway, you see. Anyone can see that as plain as the nose on their face. It's your 100th anniversary. These people just love magic numbers and anniversary dates, such as 1948 being 50 years precisely after 1898, that sort of thing. Numerology is very significant to this particular ethnic group, bless them. Our problem for Jordan Peterson is that there'll be follow-up questions to that question. It's going to be words to the effect in some other town hall somewhere, have you read the book yet that you were given on stage? The book that you always said you wanted to read? Please give us a sermon on Solzhenitsyn's other book, Mr. Peterson. What's your professional opinion? And he will not be able to answer this question unless he uses some sleight of hand, does a lot of mumbling, or changes the subject. There's really no honest way out facing that book, which is written by one of his most worshipped authority figures, Alexander Solzhenitsyn. So lying in wait for him all the time now is the follow-up question, which could pop up anywhere in the world, at any town hall, any venue. So he's more likely to reduce his visits to such uncontrolled venues and stick with controlled media only, where I suspect he's given the questions in advance. That would have to be taken into account. That would have to be part of a contract of him appearing. So he's becoming a mainstream media star, and he's only going to talk about mainstream media things. On another issue, an intrepid band of internauts brought to my attention the fact that there's been a recent large genome study of thousands of people where they've been able to isolate by statistical analysis that there's about 550 genes involved in human intelligence. And this is mud in the eye, an absolute refutation of the SJW communist blank slate theory that we have no personality and no intelligence and not even a gender when we're born. And all of that is installed by cruelly twisted parenting and nurturing, and it's all the fault of evil society. So they think therefore they can correct everything. Because they are true blank slates. The blank slate theory seems to appeal to people who are not much better than a blank slate. Kind of fascinating, isn't it? Kind of ironic, but deeply tragic for the Western world. It resulted in Dr. Watson, who discovered the DNA spiral, being sacked from his own research project. He had to sell his own Nobel Prize because he just said on a radio show one day, "Oh, I don't think Africa will ever civilise itself. They don't seem to have the average IQ." All the evidence points to it. And it was a very carefully worded and correct, mathematically true statement. Forced to resign, ruined his career, and now he's been vindicated by this new study that he was right all along, that you're born with IQ and it's different from place to place. There is an argument now, because we have IQ maps, that if we're going to do immigration at all, and I don't see why any Western nation should do any immigration, they don't have to do it at all. It's only one ethnic group that insists. That if you're going to take immigrants from anybody, you shouldn't look at the world politically, you shouldn't look at the world climatically, you should look at it IQ-wise. So you should pick your migrants from IQ maps to minimise the disparities in IQ, because it's the variation in IQ that makes peoples the most incompatible. Another item that's come to hand from this intrepid gang of internauts is that the Chinese have been confronted with an all-black movie and they basically don't like it. I remember blacks being experimented with in Chinese movies. I think started out with Bruce Lee, where they only played bit parts as a novelty, a different sort of person to look at, you see. But I don't think they were terribly popular. Then there was Jackie Chan movies where he was partnered with an outrageously funny black actor from America. But Chinese have said playfully derogatory things, that when I went in the theatre with this all-black movie I couldn't find the seats. Now that's said tongue-in-cheek. That's journalistic humour, playfulness. It's been misinterpreted as racism by all the SJWs all over the planet. But the truth is, in scanners, they've found that lots of people have an aversion to black faces. And it's an involuntary reaction, something like a spider landing on you. And it's not everybody, it's just a few people, but enough to bring out this reflex response. And some Chinese people are guilty of this too. So I admire them for their honesty. Just saying straight up, don't like that. It's the wrong colour actors, basically. They just say it straight out. I'm going to tell you something about black faces that you've probably never thought about. Now, I'm very lucky here. I've had some personal experience doing this. And that is, my wife's family are all Indian people, and they have a huge spectrum of skin colour. And they go from milk white, whiter than me, all the way up to midnight black. And what happens is, when you do a family photographing at 30 people or something, you discover that the black faces don't show up very well, and you really cannot see the detail of the faces, you see. And I can explain precisely why. It's because I'm using a colour camera. Colour cameras are about 10, 20 times less sensitive to photons, to light. So if you really want to get good quality, high resolution pictures in darkness, such as on surveillance cameras, that's why they always use black and white cameras. You don't go shooting things at night with colour cameras. So, now what this means is, and I'm going to explain this to you slowly, because it's kind of important that you get to understand this. And it's really going to cause another revolution, I think, in social media. And that is that the first digital cameras, which had only 3 pixels in 1970, invented at Kodak, was actually invented by 3 white scientists. And that's why every colour camera today doesn't correctly display black people's faces, because the light level just isn't high enough for the camera to see it, you see. Now this shows that all white people are racist. And I can see straight away that there's going to be an SJW, I'm bracing myself for it, the SJW massive attack on white people for producing racist cameras and insisting that a gamma correction curve be installed in all digital cameras to make it fair, because we're all equal. right? And so every phone camera treats black people differently to white people, and this evil has to be brought out and aired in the disinfectant of sunlight, you see, and the widespread knowledge. And it shows the true dark character of white people. Should I put that in a blog somewhere? Maybe it'll take off, become a meme. What do you think, huh? So there I have exposed the evil Ku Klux Klan inventors of the digital camera. So I feel a huge amount of white guilt about this, because it just shows that we're so guilty of every inequality inflicted on the poor suffering groups of the world. Just coming to mind is, I wonder, could we get Paul Joseph Watson to do a hard-hitting, high-impact a video about this subject, where white people have invented racist cameras, and they didn't even notice it because there's such a bunch of privileged white racists, white supremacists, and that's why black people look worse on photographs. I'm sure Paul Joseph Watson could do a wonderful video on that. I wonder if we could get the suggestion to him. And I suppose we could expect a class action lawsuit from Africans against all the white camera manufacturers who have manufactured cameras that give black faces decidedly inferior image quality. And I'm wondering, I can predict the ethnicity of the legal group, the law group, the lawyers that would push this lawsuit against all white camera manufacturers. So the possibilities are endless with this identity politics. It's just wonderful, isn't it? And this would not be called a microaggression. This would have to be called a mega aggression, wouldn't it? Really.